This project is an honest and in-depth perspective of and from former students of Milt and Hershey School. We call ourselves Milts.
An organic, open discussion of life before, during, and after attending MHS.
Milt's Podcast. Stop using my government name too all the time.
Yes, sir.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Milt Talk Podcast. We have a fantastic guest here today. Our sister, Kate Casey, has joined us from California. Yeah.
Yes.
West Coast.
Thank you so much for joining us. Obviously, you've been following what we've been doing so far, and we've been able to interview some great people, and we're excited to have you on to talk about your experience. Can you first tell the people your full name and what year you graduated?
So my name's Kate Casey, and I graduated in 1995, which feels like a minute ago. Obviously, it was not.
Yes.
But very proud graduate and thrilled to be with you today.
And your older sister, Megan Casey, was there when we were there. Is that your only sibling?
We have two other half siblings, but she graduated in 1991.
Okay, 1991. And
is that like one half of a person, or how's that work?
The half sister, it's like we don't even acknowledge them typically. You guys are the only ones that probably know they exist.
Nice.
The record, I love your sister. She's the sweetest. That's why you and I were on the phone the other day. I think you got a different take on that.
Yeah, no, she's not sweet at all. I don't know what you're talking about.
No, I saw her at Home Company. She was very nice.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, she can be, but for the most part, she's like pretty, she's like a straight shooter. I always have her, well, I don't always have, I've had her on my show a couple times.
Okay.
Nice.
And I make her watch shows that she's never watched, which is so funny. Like I just recently made her watch The Bachelor for the first time. So I had to preface the interview for people and say, I just want to let you know, my sister's the least excitable person in the world. There's no real joy to her, if you will. So when she answers questions, just know that. So when I asked her questions like, what do you think about the show? Her answers were like, this is the dumbest show. Why would anyone do this? What loser would do this show? Yes, I think she's funny because she's very dry.
Right.
Do I think of her as like sweet? No, I think she's nice to other people, but not to me.
Yeah, we probably only see that one side of her. And
yes, exactly.
So wait, where are you guys from originally before the Milt?
So we're from a town called Westchester, which is outside of Philadelphia, right near the line.
Go Philadelphia.
Right near me.
I did not realize you guys were from Westchester.
Yeah, it's a great town. It was a great place to grow up. Just a great town. Loved it.
And so
I spent a lot of time there. Never took a college class, but yeah.
Yeah, it's a great school.
And so once you graduated the Milt, you went to DC for school, right? College?
I went to DC. Actually, Megan went to the same college that I did. Our aunt was also a graduate. It's called Trinity College, and it's in Washington, DC, and it's predominantly a school for people who want to pursue a career in government or international relations. So it's part of the consortium.
What's the name of it again?
It's called Trinity College. It's an all-women's Catholic school.
Oh, wow.
And it's part of the.
Wow, I was stationed at Fort Myer and Fort Belvoir.
Oh yeah, I knew people there. Yeah.
Right, I never spent one time tricking there, so I feel.
I'm surprised because a lot of Fort Myer guys spent some time at Trinity. Yeah,
right? I don't know how I missed that.
I don't know why either because they loved us, of course. But it's part of the consortium, so you can take courses in DC from any of the colleges if you're there. And so, like I said, most of the people that go to school there want to pursue a career in government. So Nancy Pelosi, Kellyanne Conway, Maggie Sullivan, who is Hillary Clinton's chief of staff, like a lot of people that you've known to be in politics have gone to Trinity.
And your sister didn't go into politics, but you did, right?
She went into school for international relations, and then she ultimately ended up in human resources for financial service firms. So she worked for Citicorp. She was actually working for Citicorp on September 11th.
Wow.
Wow.
It's been crazy. But you kept going and you wound up, I had no idea. You worked at the White House and you told me the other day under another Milt.
Yes. So while I was at school, my first semester at Trinity College, I went to an alumni meeting in DC. And I met this incredible alum named Mike Russell. And he said, okay, what do you want to do? And I told him, I have always wanted to work in politics. And he said, I am press secretary for the Reinventing Government project under Vice President Gore, and you want to be my intern. So he worked it out that I could be his intern. And technically, to be a White House intern, you had to be a junior or senior in college so that a freshman could. And he liked to brag that I was the youngest White House intern that they had ever had. So he took me under his wing, and he was just the best mentor. He was hilarious. He taught me how to write and just like how to work, how to be a professional. Right. I wish that Milt's right now had that opportunity, even as high school students, to get like a mentorship like that. So he was really funny, and he would always crack jokes like, oh, just let her get it. She's an orphan like I am. But just like we would get me into meetings all the time. One thing I really appreciated about him was he demanded that older people respect me. So if I was with him, he'd say, I want you to meet Kate Casey. Or Katie, I went by, but then I want you to meet Katie Casey. She works under me at the Rego Project, and she's from Westchester, and she goes to Trinity College. And he demanded that they respect me, and I really appreciated that. But he was the first man, I think, in my life that just said, listen, you are incredible. You're going someplace. You're smart. You're savvy. You've got a great work ethic, and I don't want you to ever let anybody tell you any different. And so I am so grateful for that opportunity. And unfortunately, he passed away in a whitewater rafting accident. He went on a family reunion years later, and it was really, really sad, but he was awesome. Mike Russell, class of 59.
Class of 59. And that's
God bless him, 59.
How that Milt extension still happened outside of the school. All those years later, you're still connected to Milts and learning from him, and then people looking out for each other. I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
And so you had Disha on your show as well, right?
I've had a bunch of Milts on. Yes, Disha and I are classmates and stayed friends. And I had her review Real Housewives of Atlanta. Very funny. I had Kevin Sutton. He was a classmate of mine too. He also has 5 kids, and I had him watch this show called Teen Mom on MTV.
Yeah, I know.
And because he had a child when he was quite young. I think he was 19 when he had his first child. And I just thought his perspective was so interesting, being a young dad, and then his children are older than mine.
Right.
And I know Kevin as being so funny, but it was just a special interview because he was so sweet and thoughtful about parenting. And so I love that interview. Yeah, I've had a bunch of Milts on. And then Francine Seraphin graduated in 1993. She's one of my closest friends. She's the godmother of one of my kids. She was at my wedding. We're really, really close. And
the judge
a lot of Milts I've kept in touch with and have really deep friendships with. But Francine's I consider Francine a member of my family.
She's a judge in West Virginia, is that correct?
She is, which is no surprise to me because she is so opinionated and a ball buster. It's like the perfect job for her.
Well, it helped me understand you before I even got to talk to you, because I think I told you, and Warner, you might remember when she was a freshman and she came up, I remember her and her crew rolling up to us, and she was in the front and just talking bullshit. She was like, who's this person and what is that? Who can dance? And I was like, who is this little person with the mouth? And it seems like she's toned it down a little bit, but she still has
No, she's still like that. She's definitely still like that. Yeah.
So, Kate, you mentioned your show. What is your show? I know what it is, but just for anyone that's listening that doesn't know.
So it's called Reality Life with Kate Casey, and it's a podcast, and I've had it for almost 4 years now. And so I've been considered the Diane Sawyer of unscripted television. So in each episode, and I have 2 episodes a week, I interview people under the umbrella of unscripted television. So that could be a reality star, it could be a director or a producer of a reality show, a documentary, or a docuseries. So all of the shows that you're watching that are not scripted, I have either interviewed somebody or I have asked a varied group of guests to review it. So I might take in a segment, I might have an orthopedic surgeon from West Virginia review a show. And then the next episode, I might have a plumber. I mean, it's always someone different, but I like it because it gives people, different kinds of people, perspectives on shows to watch. So I guess people would consider me sort of like, I'm sort of the go-to person when it comes to what to watch in unscripted television. But the great thing about it is I get to interview people who are really storytellers in the way that they have developed a show or their depiction on a show. So I feel really privileged to have this great job where I get to live out one of my favorite things is to ask people questions. I'm a curious person. And so I get to like pick back the layers of someone's life or expose someone to a life that they don't really know much about, a window in someone else's world. And I just get to ask questions of people. So it's a great job. It's really, really fun. And it's totally different from what I started doing. And I wrote that letter to the senior that we've all been asked to do. And I said, you know, just know that what you start doing at age 22 is very rarely what you end up doing 20 years later.
That's a good point. I just finished my letter too, which is it's awesome to be able to reach back and help them. Speaking of the Milt in that vein, you spoke at Founders Day last year, right? How was that?
I did. It was weird. It was weird because I got off the plane and I've been living in LA for so long that it was weird to just get acclimated back to central Pennsylvania life.
Right. Cow shit and chocolate.
Yeah, it was just weird. And then I had the nicest conversation with the gentleman that took me in the shuttle back to the lodge. And he had been a high school student who just graduated about 2 years before from Steelton.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was there, I just remember the locals just having such disdain for us. Like we were lower level people, like scum of the earth, basically. And this kid said, we all in my high school would have wished to have gone to Milt & Hershey. Like that was like a dream. And we feel like those that go to that school are so lucky. And it just seemed like it was a real flip from when I was there. I do think that the people there are quite kind that live there. And they were excited to hear that I had graduated from school. Maybe because I had graduated, I wasn't a current student. And then driving around and I was surprised how sentimental I felt driving past my student home and just seeing some of the teachers. I was privileged to speak in front of the entire school. Yeah. So I got to see a lot of people that work for the school that I had not seen for some time. But I think that the most memorable moment was turning to my right and seeing a student home full of second grade boys and how emotional it made me, because I have 5 kids and my only boy is a second grader. And to look at them and just to think, I'm going to go home to my son and he's going to have a life experience that's so different than these young boys. And I just wanted to take them home with me. And they were so sweet. And I have to say, they had the best manners, and those house parents were doing such a fantastic job. And they were asking me questions, which is always like a good sign for me that they're being parented well. If a child asks questions of adults, they're confident enough, and they're asking me questions and quite affectionate. And I just felt like some empathy for them and some fear for them. It was like a mix of emotions. And so I left there feeling like sad that I couldn't do more for them. I mean, what could I possibly do? But I think that was the hardest, because I was looking through a different lens, not as a student, but as a parent.
Right.
And also I think I had more empathy than I had ever had for the staff of the school and how you're limited in how much you can do. And perhaps the house parent that knows the personal history of this child and knowing that you're not their parent, but you can only do so much. And knowing that how hard it would be to instill a great sense of self in a child that has already suffered through so much trauma. I think that was the biggest thing for me, was just looking through a different lens.
Right.
Was that the first time you were back there since you graduated?
I think it was like the 3rd time, but it had been so long since I think I maybe had gone 2 times within like a 5-year span outside of school. And then it had been quite some time because I had moved away to California, and then I started having children. And I just think I also felt like I don't want to go back until I can either bring my children or I can go back and deliver some sort of like message to children. I felt like I needed enough of a break away from it to have some perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess my little dream, I had made a joke about it in the Founders Day speech. Like, does this mean I'm never going to be asked to come back for alumnus of the year? I guess like that's my ultimate dream, is that somehow I can go back and be an alumnus. That would be great.
Well, something that, you know, we have 4 children or 5?
I have 5. Yeah.
We have a whole squad there. Something we talk about is how the Milt affected us as parents. You know, like, you know, we've asked people before, would you send your kid to the Milton Hershey School? And I'd say most of the people say absolutely not. And it's not because they didn't love the Milt, but because it gave us, being at the Milt gave us an appreciation of being a parent and what being a parent means. How has it affected you with having 5 kids? That's a lot of love to spread around.
Well, first, I have to say that people look at me like I'm a cult leader. Like I'm one of the Duggar people who have all these children. Like I'm a freak of nature. But I'm quite honest with you, I don't ever feel overwhelmed. And I think it's because I lived in a student home with 16 girls.
Mm-hmm.
I just am very used to being around noise. I like the system that the student home has, where everybody is a chore and we're team members and we all work together. I liked, you know, we're in isolation right now, and it's just not a big deal to me because I think about being in a student home in a snowstorm for a week and how you become creative and how you rely on one another. So, and ultimately also that the bonds that you create as children when you're growing up together are very similar to the bonds that you create when you're living in a student home together. I know that if I see Aisha Stroop, and it's 20 years later, I'm going to pick up that conversation like that because we grew up together and we are, in a sense, we're siblings. We really are. We live in different parts of the country and had different parents, but we're really siblings. Yep. So I'm never really overwhelmed, and I call myself a baby hoarder, and I would be happy to have one more child. I don't feel that overwhelmed, probably because I grew up in Milton Hershey School. I also think that as a parent, the most important thing, I always say that the thing that I want my children to be are curious people. I want them to ask questions of other people. I always say, if you go on a play date, you have to come home and tell me 2 things you learned about the parents, the grandparents, whomever is at the home. You have to ask them questions. Be a curious person. And the third thing I think that, and that came out of Milton Hershey, being around people who didn't come from the same family, who had different life experiences, and cultivating relationships with people who had similar life experiences helped me develop me into an empathetic person, a curious person. And the third most important thing I think that it helped in terms of parenting is that social justice is paramount for me. I had the privilege of growing up with people who came from traumatic backgrounds. And so I remind my children all the time that though we may all be together in this family, this is what family looks like for all other people, and opening them up to life experiences that don't look like their own. The first preschool I sent my children to was a Jewish preschool. Now, I'm an Episcopalian. The Jewish parishioner, people at the Jewish preschool are like, why in God's name are you here? And I told them it's because I want my children's first life experience to be with people who don't share their faith, so that later in life, when someone says anything about a Jewish person, they're going to think back, who are my first friends in preschool? They have to know people who don't look like them, who don't have the same God that they have, who don't have the same culture, because it's the only way that they can truly be a global citizen. So I think that the Milton Hershey experience was really important to me. And my husband's like from Orange County, and everybody he went to school with was white. And I think that it's really important for my children to know that they have to know people who do not look like them.
Yeah. You said you were a baby hoarder, and you said that you loved noise, and it is because of the Milt, because you're so used to, a million things going on within one household. So that's what makes you comfortable?
That's what makes me comfortable. Yeah, noise to me is happiness, laughter, life.
Right.
A quiet house to me is like sad. People feel like they can't be themselves. I just think letting children express themselves, that's pure bliss. By the way, Love and Knuckles was my my kind of pen name, my website for a long time, and it came from a story from Milt and Hershey. I had a girl in my student home who was younger than me. I was in something in student home Highland called the Pilot Program, which was kind of the first of its kind. And so instead, after Maysland, which was 9th to 12th, I moved to Highland, and it was kids from kindergarten through 12. And the whole idea behind it was for you to sort of like be raised as siblings.
Right.
So in other words, you're not going to have 6 ninth graders in a student home, but, kids throughout. Yeah. So there was a girl in my student home named Lisa Roselli, and she was younger than me. And her father used to come and pick her up. And I just thought he was the funniest, craziest character because he would be wearing bell bottoms and like shirts that didn't match. And those are the people that I enjoy most in life. The people that are like, they live on another planet. They're my favorite.
They are who they are.
So she used to tell me about him, and I couldn't get enough of it. Like, one thing that this guy did was for Christmas one year, he gave them a New Kids on the Block poster, but he had forged all the names of the band members on it.
Nice.
That to me is genius. I was like, that's the funniest thing I've ever heard. Anyway, he used to sign all of his letters to his daughters with Love and Knuckles, Dad. And I just felt like he encapsulated everything that makes me laugh in the world. People that are like, clearly there's a big story behind it. I mean, now in retrospect, you probably have mental health issues, but it's like, go into the beat of your own drum.
Right.
Like somebody who's so off center that they're a character, like the character actor in the movie, the weirdo in the corner, like that's who I just love people like that. And they love me too. So that's where Love and Knuckles came from. And Lisa Roselli thought it was hilarious.
That's a great story. That's awesome. It's coming full circle is the way I see it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So how's the show doing right now on Bravo?
My podcast?
The podcast, how's it doing?
Podcast is awesome. I have great relationships with a lot of the television networks, so I get some fantastic interviews. I'd like to build it into a TV show. But I also work on production on the side. I'm working on another podcast for another network, and then I'm working on a documentary for another network, and then I just cast and developed a docuseries that we're hoping to sell as soon as the virus kind of stops.
Stops.
So I just feel like over these last 4 years, I have a pulse on what people want to watch. And so I'm really excited. I'm working on some great stuff. So I've moved from government into production, television production.
Yeah.
Such a crazy
really
transition.
fun. Yeah, I like to be busy. I'm confused by people that say they're bored. I'm like, why would you want to be bored?
Well, they obviously don't have kids either. I think I mentioned to you my former roommate and somebody who's been a guest on the show, Sean Rector. He was on Survivor.
Yes.
Which was, I know you've done a lot of work with. And the guy who hooked him up with that, Mike Boogie, was on Big Brother for a while and used to own the house and Dolce and all that stuff. And so that, that stuff is interesting to me because what the people see or hear on TV is edited down. And I would get the real stuff from him, behind the scenes. So when you're talking to these people, like, what are the stories like? Like, the people that are on reality shows.
They're amazing, but you also have to remember that depending on the show, there's an archetype. So for the most part, when I talk to people that are from the Bachelor franchise, they're garbage human beings. They're people who would like to be on the show because they would like to be Instagram famous.
It's vanity.
So they have little interest in anyone but themselves, and they believe themselves to be movie stars and very interesting. So that's who they are. But some of the most interesting people have been people that you would not have thought about. Like, I loved Mike the Situation from the Jersey Shore. Now, a lot of people were like, oh my God, not true at all. When I spoke to him, he had some perspective and said, oh my God, why did I let my brother do my taxes? And oh my God, I was high for a year on that show. And I was such an idiot and I hated the way I treated women. And he was like he was the most interesting person because he had a moment of clarity going off the show and thought, I really blew it. And I think that people now that when they see him back on the show post prison, they see a totally different Mike. And so I'm grateful when I have interviews like that. One of my favorite interviews was with a woman who had been profiled in a documentary about Ted Bundy.
Okay.
She was one of the sorority sisters at Florida State University that had survived his attack. Okay. And so she went through the 15 minutes that Ted Bundy had spent in the sorority house, and she wrote what he did every minute, how he went up the steps and how he unscrewed the light bulbs so no one could have any light, and how he had used wood to break into the lock was broken on the sorority house. So he opened the door and there was a piece of wood beside the door. So he took it with him and he went up the steps and he unscrewed the light bulbs. And then he went from room to room to room. And so the first room he murdered the girls, the second room he murdered the girls, and then he went to the third room and he got to Kathy's room and she and her roommate were in there and he ended up trying to bludgeon them. And Kathy's this part of her mouth had been open because he had hit her so bad and broke a teeth. But what had saved them was one of the sorority sisters had pulled into the driveway and their curtains were open. So as the car parked, the light shone into the room and the light shone on Ted and he got spooked and he ran out the house. And she ended up surviving. And she said that one of the things that she had done in the course of the next year to survive was she purposely took a job in a lumber yard. And that was so she would, and as a receptionist, and that was so she would get over a fear of strange men, but also to get over the smell of wood, because the wood was what he had used to bludgeon her. And I just thought, oh my God. And she's just going through and she's just explaining. And then she suffered a miscarriage and she had cancer and still she was alive. And she was like this advocate and you're just like
badass.
Yeah. And I love stories like that. I'm like, when would I have met this woman? And this story will live with me forever. And I'm proud to tell people about her. So those are kind of my favorite interviews. But truthfully, my favorite interview, which is episode 121, I will never forget, is I spoke to the man that had produced a show called Rock of Love with Bret Michaels. Do you remember Bret Michaels? And he did Flavor of Love with Flavor Flav. And so like one thing that he said that made me laugh so hard was they had to explain to Bret Michaels how to date women because he always had groupies.
There's no reference point, right?
Yeah.
No reference. He's like, I opened the door and there's a woman there who was naked. Like, I don't know how to date. So they had to like, okay, when you go out with a woman, you ask them like, what's your name? What do you like to do? Would you like some wine? What do you like to eat? He had no idea. And it's like, of course not, because he's a rock and roll star. And then the other story that he told me where if you listen to the episode, you will listen to me laugh for 5 minutes straight was, I mean, I love Flavor Flav. I just think he's one of the funniest people that I've ever been on TV. So
he's also brilliant. People don't realize he can play
very brilliant.
He had nicknames for all the contestants because that's just who he is. He's just like comes up with nicknames. And so one of the girls went on a date, but they had been like up and drinking and whatever. And she had to go to the bathroom so bad. And by the way, her nickname was something. That's what he called her, something. And she had to go to the bathroom really bad. And it was like kind of this rose ceremony. And she had been waiting to go to the bathroom. And she actually went to the bathroom on the floor. So he has his earpiece on. And one of the producers is like, something shit the floor, meaning something, the girl,
right,
shit the floor. And they're going back and forth. And he's like, what? I'm not gonna lie to you. I feel like I peed my pants. Like I could not stop laughing. So it's just like this. That's why the show's great because you're gonna get these like inside stories that are just so.
That's reality.
And it's different every week. Like okay. Last week on Wednesday I had the directors of it's called Atlanta's Missing and Murder of the Lost Children. Are you guys familiar with that story?
That one I don't know.
Okay, so from 1979 to 1981, there were over 30 African-American boys that were murdered in Atlanta. And it was awful because parents in Atlanta did not want their children to go outside because they were just being murdered, and they would find their bodies like months later. And they couldn't figure out if it was a serial killer or not. And they had Atlanta at that time was exciting because it was like this new city, like this bustling city, a lot of pride in African-American businesses, but at the same, and they had the first Black mayor, and then all these children are missing. And the police department and the government were trying to kind of stifle the story because it wasn't it wasn't highlighting this message that they wanted to get across. Come to Atlanta. This is like a great place to start your business. And so the documentarians went back and they retold the story, and they have archival footage, and you meet the families of the children that were murdered. And it was very interesting. So I interviewed them. And then yesterday I had the executive producer of The Masked Singer. And so she told me what they do for that show to ensure that the contestants, the secrecy of who they are and all the steps they take, which are bonkers. Like,
so
you're like,
true. They do really keep it secret.
It's unbelievable. They come up with a fake name for the show, and it has to go the whole season. So all paperwork, text messaging, anything, any communication, they have to talk about it in the name of the fake show. When they find the contestant, they have to give a list of all the people they have spoken to about the show. Those people have to sign NDAs.
Right.
When they come to the show for the first time, they're immediately put into their mask. So the people who are working on the show, they have no idea who the person even is. So I don't know, it was interesting for her to just kind of go through. She was the person that brought Dancing with the Stars to the United States, and how the agents in LA were all taking bets on the show, how the show would not work.
It's gonna bomb, right?
And would bomb, and they thought the same thing about The Masked Singer. And I told her, well, why don't we get in a convertible and you get in the back of the car like a prom queen, and we have a blowhorn, and we give everybody at CAA the middle finger because you, my friend, are a hit maker and you're killing it. Yeah, so it's great. And then Monday I'm going to talk to the new Real Housewife of New York, and I'm also going to interview the daughter of Natalie Wood, because she made a documentary about the life of her mother. She drowned when she was 43 in 1981. And people really kind of just only think about her death. So it was a documentary about her mother. It's coming out in 2 weeks on HBO. I cried my face off. So anyway, the long story short is that I get to talk to really interesting people all day long.
Yeah, that's awesome that you're not just doing the reality stuff, which those people are fantastic, but you're working on other projects as well. So
you wrote a book too, though, didn't you?
I did. I wrote a book called You Know You're Pregnant When. Because I just think the stuff that happens when you're pregnant, it's so bizarre. You know, like, you know you're pregnant when you go to Costco for a refrigerator, but just come home with 2 pizzas. Like, they're just things that are weird. You know you're pregnant when you wear your nice underwear for your OBGYN and not your husband. It's just like stupid stuff that only happens when you're pregnant. Yeah, and I wrote a lot of stuff when I was pregnant or with newborns. I mean, I still have basically a newborn, but I wrote for the Today Show and a lot of parenting sites, and wrote a book. And then that transitioned to doing stand-up comedy. And from there, I went into doing podcasts. So yeah, it's been a weird ride. But when I started having children, my husband's best friend said, you know, you always have talked about comedy. You need to pursue it. And so I did. And I think I wrote also in that letter to that young senior, write down all the things that interest you, and then figure out a way to have a job that hits all those points. So for me, I always loved journalism. I always loved politics, and I always loved comedy. And I've been able in my life so far to hit all those points, figure out a way to have a job in with those industries.
That's amazing, because it's not easy.
It's not, especially with 5 kids.
Plus the kids. Kudos to you.
But I also feel like when I meet people that are just beginning that chapter having kids, and they're like, oh, especially women who say, how am I going to juggle? But the truth to me is, I think children make you infinitely more creative. It makes you a better multitasker. It makes you more empathetic. There are so many things that come when you become a parent. I think you work harder when you're a parent. I mean, like, you guys have kids. Like, do you ever have time to just sit and read a book? No.
No.
You figure out how to do a lot of stuff in a day. And I think if you love something enough, you will find time for it.
Awesome. Awesome.
So did the Milt help you with your multitasking? Because I know with the Milt, and you wouldn't realize, but I was thinking about like a day in the life of a Milt. How many different things they got accomplished in a day. It's almost like that old saying from the Army, you know, we do more before 9 a.m. than most people do all day or something like that.
Yeah.
Damn right, brother.
I think so, because we're in isolation, and my son was up at like 7:15, and I said, you need to go clean your room. You need to get ready for school. And he was like, but I just woke up. And I found myself going back to, really? Okay, well, I woke up at 5:30, grabbed a shower, and then I had breakfast, and then I did an after breakfast chore, and then I scrubbed did the scour hop, and then I went back to my room, I cleaned my room, I got into the bus, and then I went to school, and then I came home, and I did chore, and he was like, what?
Right.
Don't forget about the
you learn to like compress a lot in a day. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
So
also, one thing that I noticed recently that I did about one of the kids was eating and got up, and I said, no, you sit until everyone's done eating. And it reminded me of my house parents saying that. Like, no, you don't get up. We're a family. You wait until everybody's done eating.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's how it should be.
Yeah.
That's how we do it here too.
Kate, with our project, I got a question for you. Is there anybody that you would like to see get interviewed, or somebody, whether it was a student or a house parent or an administrator, somebody that you think has some good stories to share with us down the road? I know that's kind of an odd question, but
I have a friend named Mark Souter. He was class of 95. One of the funniest people to this day. He works in financial services now in Baltimore. His wife's pregnant with their second child. He was actually my boyfriend for a little bit.
Oh boy.
College, whatever. And we worked together in DC for a little bit at a PR firm. But he just was so funny because I think he sort of personifies the classmate who made everyone laugh and made the best of it. Yeah. His mother, he went to Milt and Hershey because his mother had breast cancer, and his father was not willing to take he and his brother in. So he kind of is one of those kids where it was a health issue that got him to school. But he would just do stupid things that made me laugh so hard. Like, he wanted to get out of writing a paper one day, so he wore a neck brace to school. I don't know how he got access to it, but he wore a neck brace and he rocked it for like 3 days. And I told teachers that he wasn't able to complete the school projects because he had a serious neck injury, and it was beautiful. Like, he would only I mean, and that's the kind of stuff that I'm just like, so another thing was Reverend Carpenter at the time, who was there, a reverend for like a year there. He was a weirdo. But in every church service, he would make announcements. Now, Mark didn't really put much effort into school. So when Reverend Carpenter made an announcement at the beginning of church, we want to stand up and applaud Mark Souter for getting into Harvard University. Well done, son. I mean, Mark couldn't even make it into a community college at that point.
Let alone Harvard, right?
And he was just like a prankster like that. And I mean, we were just laughing so hard. It was just like, I can't even touch this. Like, the stuff that it was stuffing in his student home to just make people laugh. And those are the stories that I think are great. They're just so, I mean, there's so many people that have gone through the school that are incredible. And I often think that sometimes the school does a disservice by focusing on a few of them. Like, I was saying to Peeker, like, I'm sorry. I was surprised I got an invitation to come here. I thought Alan Kraszewski would be here again. It was just like, I felt like when we were seeing 3 people, like, these are great. Mimi Song was one of my roommates. She was a whiz. She showed up. She was from Korea. She was doing calculus when she was like a sophomore, and now she is like working in financial services and is like a brainiac. Like, just interesting people like that who have jobs that are kind of like not the typical job. I think those are the ones that are interesting, and sometimes they're not the people that are the most vocal. So it's just finding them, which is kind of fun.
We talk about comedy, how a lot of us use comedy as a defense mechanism to kind of get through the Milt, let alone life. So just those jokes, when we get back together, like you said, Aisha Stroop, you talk to her, it's like no time has passed. I'm closer with Milts than I am with my own family. I think humor has gotten us through a lot in life with the Milt. So
also, it's a great equalizer. I mean, I grew up in a town where I felt like everyone's parents were married, which in retrospect was silly, but your adolescent mind. And I just remember going to Milt and Hershey and feeling like this camaraderie that we all had come from weird parents.
Bunch of freaks. Yep.
Yeah, like I was just like, oh my God, your parents are amazing. And I think that on a fundamental level, that was the icebreaker. Like, oh yeah, my dad's he totally abandoned me, and then my other friend would say, oh, my dad's in jail. I'm like, oh my God, amazing. It's like I think that's just it's the great equalizer. And I read somewhere in your Facebook group, Benaya Marshall had said, I always considered us having this great bond because of trauma. I call it trauma bonding. And I just thought that is brilliant. That's so true.
Yeah.
And that bonding from trauma is so deep. It's so deep.
Yeah.
Because when you have suffered from trauma in any capacity and you can talk to someone else, crack yourself open and find commonality in trauma, that bond could be greater. It's like my friend who is a first responder. He was the first responder at the Pentagon on September 11th. And the bonds that he has with the other first responders are so deep and meaningful because only they have walked in each other's shoes.
Right.
And not that I'm comparing September 11th to Milt and Hershey, I never would, but when you're a child who has experienced trauma and you meet another child, that bond will be greater than any colleague, any friend you meet as an adult, because before your prefrontal cortex is fully developed at 21, you're just trying to make sense of anything. And when you add to that incredible trauma, God, that's really hard. And I think that now that when I look back at all of us, I'm just so proud of everybody.
Yep.
Because most of us are parents. We're really great members of our communities. We're wonderful friends. Yep. We're all very empathetic people, I find. Milt and Hershey people are just like really giving, but very empathetic people. And we're all in our own ways like social justice warriors. I think that's probably, most people would think that Milt and Hershey, I think, would want people to be passing the message on about like some sort of financial thing. But the truth is, I think he created an incredible amount of social justice warriors. Now, I will say, as an adult now, I have this dream. My husband owns a software company, and we've always harbored this dream of eventually having a venture capital fund that helps young entrepreneurs. And I just think that that's the other thing that has been so important to me in my life, is that the message of Milt and Hershey is so important. I'll leave you with this too, is that in the second grade in a California schools, you learn about heroes. And I was totally confused why Milt and Hershey was never added to the list of the heroes that we always learn, that these kids are learning about. And so when my oldest was a second grader, I brought the story of Milt and Hershey, and I brought chocolates for all the kids. And when I explained the story, they were like wide-eyed, like, wait, what? Either teachers were like, how do we not know about this story? And so now my son's in second grade. And my son came home and said, we got to pick our heroes today. And they went to the library to pick from the selection. He said, I chose Milt and Hershey. Yeah. And I cried because the school had gone and purchased the Who is Milt and Hershey book and added it to the school library.
That's awesome.
And so now every year, one of the second graders gets to choose a Milton Hershey. And so I went in and I read the story about Milton Hershey. And at the end, I always say, did you know we created this school for children who came from the wrong side of the door of opportunity? And I explain, and then I say, and you know what? And you guys all know somebody who went to school there. And they're like, we did? We do? And I say, yeah, I went to school. And I think it's like, wait, what? Because I present myself as someone who's like a professional, like I live in a nice place, I've worked hard, I'm a good member of the community. And they're like, you did it? You made it? Your parents? Like, yeah. And you know what? I'm going to pass it on. I'm going to pass on the message of giving back, but also pass story. So I think that people who grow up in the Pennsylvania, kind of New Jersey area, they assume almost everybody knows the Milton Hershey story, and maybe they do. But for those of us that don't live close by, like we have a responsibility to pass that message on too, because truthfully, people out west don't even know the story of Milton Hershey.
Wow.
Yeah, no, it really, people are just finding out about the school, which is crazy.
Yeah.
I know that is. Well, I think it's a good point. You had said, we're talking about like this trauma bond. When you went to the White House for your internship, here's a guy who graduated, 50 years prior to you, going to bat for you, getting you in. Yeah. How many other people that you could say went to the same high school 50 years before you would be like, going to bat for you at a job? I think that's just a...
you know what? One more thing I want to say about it. And I was a woman.
Yeah.
And I was a woman, and he was like, no, she's going through the door. No, she's going to be an intern, and you need to meet her. You need to know her name. Did you pay attention to her name? He demanded the respect, and I was a woman. And listen, we met a lot of the old alums, and some of them didn't like that women went to the school.
Right.
And this guy was like, no, she's my sister. No, we're the same. We are the absolute same. And I think that's a testament to who he was, and he was such a great guy.
It's a beautiful story.
Listen, before we let you go, you brought up the forum, and we got a couple questions for you. What was your post? Was it your favorite or least favorite chore, or was it your favorite or least favorite food at the Milt?
Food.
My least favorite food was shepherd's pie.
Whoa.
That is such a vile, gross. And I remember when I first went to Milton Hershey, you had to do family style at lunch, and you'd have to sit 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th graders.
Yeah.
Gary something or another sat next to me, and he had wild hair, I remember. But that was a good lesson, and you have to just suck it up and eat. Like when my kids, I serve them something they don't want to eat, I'm like, I had to eat ham, okay? Like, you're going to eat this crap.
Lebanon bologna.
Lebanon bologna.
Yeah, right.
So disgusting.
No bueno.
Or you know what else? I have to say the worst was cheesy eggs, because I abhor cheese. I hate cheese. And having to eat that runny cheese eggs, that was the worst.
All right, and so the chore. Favorite or least favorite chore?
I liked vacuuming. I still like to vacuum. I did not like cleaning the showers.
Ugh.
And I also did like, what's something that I did not like is when I went to Milton Hershey, is that when I first went there, the house parents didn't have curtains on the showers.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like, what? Like,
what's going on here?
14-year-old is so insecure about their body.
Right.
And I'm with these girls, and they're like full like bush and everything. And I was like, wait, what? So I used to stick my towel over the railing, so I'd try to have a little bit of privacy.
A little bit of something.
I mean, listen, you take this kid out of like her home, and then you put her in this group home
with no shower curtain.
With no shower curtains.
And a bunch of strangers.
Yeah, I mean, just weird.
Yeah.
That just would have been one more extra thing we would have had to clean in the showers.
That's true too.
So gross.
Yeah.
Well, Kate, thank you so much for stopping by and taking time out to talk to us, man. We're super appreciative of having you on with us today.
Thank you. My sister told me you sent her a note and said, "Oh my God, you and Kate are total opposites."
Opposites.
Yeah.
Right.
So she wanted to know, what did you mean by that?
Well, I remember Megan being like super quiet.
Yeah, she was quiet.
Like
really?
Like,
yeah,
super ginger, like, like, hey, hi, like very soft spoken. So when you were like,
wow,
fuck her, she's not shit. I was like, wow, she's a tough cookie. I can't see that. Like I couldn't imagine the Megan that I remember.
Oh yeah. She'd break someone down in an alley for sure.
That's hilarious.
I mean, I would ultimately kick her ass, but she can take some
documented.
You know what's funny about Megan too? She was a great hurdle jumper, and she can still run. Like Leroy Galloway was quite a coach. That she can still do the hurdles.
Yep.
Really?
She took her kids to the track.
That sounds like it's
oh my god. Yeah, she can do it.
What did you say, Warren?
This is a challenge for you, Jess. Jess used to run hurdles too.
Yes. I used to run with Megan in hurdles.
You guys need to get the band back together and run hurdles.
Schofield already is trying to race me in hurdles. Every time I see him, he wants to race. So, but he's usually at a fast food joint during a track meet, so he's not going to make it.
Yeah, a bunch of pulled hamstrings and a lot of tears.
A bunch of hamstrings.
A lot of ice.
Well, tell sis
for the nurse.
We're super glad to have you on. Hopefully we can have you on another time. If you'd like to, we'd love to have you back. We're just getting started with this.
Yeah.
We just dropped the first episode and hopefully some more to come. And if you got any insight, we'd love to take it.
Well, now you have to come on my show. You have to review something.
Nice.
Oh,
nice.
I'll forget something.
There you go.
Yeah. I'm going to purposely choose something horribly terrible.
All right.
Like Love After Lockup or something.
Oh, man, I don't know.
There you go.
I don't know. The Masked Singer one I love.
Oh, do you? Oh, good.
Yeah, my daughter will flip out if she heard me talking about it.
One of my really good friends is a judge, Jenny McCarthy. I'm on her show all the time.
I'm tight with her.
Yeah.
I love Jenny.
Yeah. Jenny and Donnie.
She's so funny.
She's been funny for a long time.
He's really funny. Yes.
But
they're very normal. Like they'll text me in their pajamas and say, like, we have nothing to watch. Tell us what to watch.
I feel like that's an East Coast. I don't know. I feel like you've been out in the West Coast for a while, but I feel like East Coast people, West Coast people, there's a big difference. And
you know what the difference is this. I'm still very East Coast. People here are like, you don't belong here. Yeah. The difference is in the East Coast, people want to be the trendsetter. And in the West Coast, people are terrified of not being part of the trend.
Right. Standing out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Donnie's from Boston because he was
He's
in
from Boston, right? And she's from Chicago.
Oh, she's a Chi-Town girl.
Yeah. And also, when I meet kids, I always ask them, okay, where are you going to go to college? What do you want to study? What do you want to do? And I think that's an East Coast thing. That's when we meet somebody, what do you do?
Right.
What do you do? Like, what's going on? Right. And here they ask things about what you have.
Yeah. What do you drive?
So where do you live? Do you have a boat? And what kind of car do you drive? I'm like, that's the last thing I would ever ask somebody. I could give two shits about where they live, what they have. I want to know who you are. What do you do?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Where are you from? Right. What's going on? What are you making happen? Yeah. That's a big difference too.
It's a different world out there for sure.
Yeah.
Well, all right. Well, thank you so much for making time. Like I said, we'll
thank you.
And I'll tell Megan that I don't know why they said that you were so nice.